Having a professional looking online course is something that we all want. But how do we actually get our online course to look professional? After all, isn't it all about the content? Well, yes, but as well as the content, you want your course to look professional enough that people want to learn from it and also that they do learn from it. So in this episode, I am going to go over 5 things that you can do to help make your online course look professional. Welcome to Bloggers Creating Courses, the podcast which will take you behind the scenes of creating an online course. I'm your host, Verity Songon, founder and education consultant at veritysongon.com. I'm so excited to help you create an online course that you are proud of and to be part of your journey to scale your business as an online course creator. Let's get into the episode. We are here today with just myself. We have had quite a few lovely and wonderful guests and experts in their field on the podcast for a few episodes now, which is really exciting. And I am so grateful to all of those guests who have come on and have shared their expertise and given us so much value when it comes to helping you as our listeners to create and scale their perfect online course. But we are here with just me today, and I want to talk to you about how you can make your online course look professional. Now, for the purpose of this episode, I'm not going to be going into the nuances and the ins and outs of creating the course and the actual course content. What I'm going to be talking about is what some people might consider to be the more superficial parts of making your online course look more professional. But regardless of what you think is superficial or not superficial when it comes to making your course look professional, we're going to go through some of these points today. And I think that, or I hope that you're going to find them really useful when it comes to creating or continuing to create the online course that you are going to make or have already got. So we have got 5 ways of how we are going to make your online course look professional or look more professional if you've already got an online course published, because there's nothing wrong with going back in and changing some of these things if you think that they are right for your program and for your online course and for your audience. So the first thing that you can do to make your online course look professional is to get yourself a professional and personalized domain name. And what I mean by this is you are not using the generic and generalized domain name which comes free with your online course package. So for example, you're not going to be using veritysongon.teachable.com, or just using Teachable as an example because my courses are currently hosted on Teachable itself. Rather than doing that, you could use your own domain name. So for example, mine is veritysongon.com, and what you could do is have veritysongon.com/courses, and that takes you to your course website. Equally, you could have a subdomain, so courses.veritysongon.com, just as an example. What you're doing with that professional domain name is just making your course look a bit more professional because you've not got the online course provider or the online course platform in your URL there. If for whatever reason you can't change the URL of the domain name of where your courses are hosted, maybe it's in a higher package that you don't feel that you can upgrade to, or you don't feel that you need to upgrade to for this one feature, what you can do is use a plugin. If you're using WordPress to host your website, is you can use a plugin called Pretty Links. There are lots of other Pretty Link alternatives out there, but I just have a preference to Pretty Links. And what you can do is you go on over to Pretty Links within your WordPress dashboard. You enter the URL that your link is going to lead to, and you can add in there a link. So for example, you can have it set so if somebody went onto the internet, typed in veritysongon.com/courses, they will be redirected to my Teachable site. It's completely free to do. There is a paid version of Pretty Links, but there's also a free version, which is the version that I use. I've never had any need to upgrade, and that is a great way of having a slightly more professional looking domain name without the added potential cost there. The other great thing about having a more personalized domain name is that it's easier to tell people about. when you're giving out your generalized online school name, that can be quite difficult, particularly if there's loads of letters and numbers in it. It can be difficult to remember, difficult to hand over. Whereas if you can just say it's veritisongon.com/courses, for example, that's much easier for someone to plug into their internet browser and be redirected to your online school there. So that's my first piece of advice. Get yourself a professional domain name. If you can't upgrade or you don't have the feature in the package that you're using for your online school, use something like Pretty Links, where you can use a customized URL to send people to your online school. The next thing I'd really recommend you do is get yourself an SSL certificate. Now, the vast majority, in fact, every online course platform that I have come across has got an SSL certificate installed within it, but make sure that it is activated. Not every online school automatic provides an activated SSL certificate, so make sure that it is activated. The SSL certificate is when you're on your internet browser, you'll see a little padlock next to the URL that you were visiting. That padlock is showing the person visiting that website that it is a secure website. It is essentially protected with an SSL certificate, and it also changes your URL from http:// to https:// Again, it's showing that your site is secure. So make sure that you do get an SSL certificate for your domain name. And if you're hosting your course on an online course platform, as I said, the vast majority of the time, they do have SSL certificates included. Just make sure that it is activated, and you can always talk to your chat support or the support for your online course school to make sure that it is activated. It just gives people that little bit more reassurance, particularly if you're asking them to pay you and part ways with their money. People, particularly in this day and age, they want reassurance that when they're giving away their money online, that it is secure and they're not being scammed or what have you. The next thing that I am going to suggest that you do is to check your layout. Now, I know that I said that we weren't going to discuss content of the course within this episode, but do go through your layout. Make sure that it makes sense. Walk yourself through your course. And what I always like to do before I hit publish on a course is actually leave it a week, 2 weeks. And I know that some people are probably thinking, but you're losing a week, 2 weeks of sales. And yes, potentially you are, but you leave your course for a couple of weeks, go back to it, you are looking at it with fresh eyes. You will pick up on spelling mistakes. You'll pick up on, oh, that picture doesn't quite work. You'll realise, well, why am I telling somebody that before I've given them this lesson? That makes no sense. And get people to review your course as well, because that will really help you with your layout. So just double check your layout. Make sure that it makes sense. Make sure you've got a beginning, a middle and an end. Make sure that your course and what you're delivering actually matches up to those original learning aims and outcomes that you wanted to achieve when you first started writing and creating your course. Point number 4 is check your grammar and your spelling. This is so important. I do fully appreciate not everyone is going to be a literary expert, and I'm not expecting everybody to be a literary expert as well, but make sure that the basics are met. You can use something like Grammarly. I love Grammarly. There's both a free and paid for version of Grammarly. I've only ever used the free version. I'll leave the link down in the show notes, but I've only ever used the free version and never felt the need to upgrade personally. But it is a fantastic app. You can use it on pretty much any device. It's got an online and an offline feature, so you can actually use it when you're typing straight into your online course platform. When you're writing on your website, you can have Grammarly working at the same time, which is absolutely, I love it, because it will tell you when your sentences don't make sense, when your syntax doesn't make sense, when you've got grammatical errors. And I also find it really, really helpful, because even though I'm based in Britain, the majority of my clients and people who I work with are based in America. So what I try and do as much as possible is write in American English, purely because that's where the vast majority of my clients and the vast majority of my audience is based. It doesn't always work, but sometimes we do end up with some British phrases and spellings in there. But what I can do with Grammarly is I can set it to American English, and then it picks up on what I need to correct and what I need to change for my lovely American clients and counterparts out there. And my final tip of something that you need to be looking at in order to make your online course more professional is your font text and your font color. The best fonts that you can have for writing online, which are the most legible to the most amount of people, are Sans fonts. And examples of Sans font include Open Sans, Roboto, Lato, PT Sans, your Source Sans Pro. What you want to be avoiding essentially are ones which have got little flicks at the end, things that are just difficult to read. And there's nothing wrong with having your headings in a slightly different font, in a script font maybe, but you need to be making sure that things are legible to the most amount of people. It's not necessarily about looking pretty. You can have the most beautiful font, but if it's not legible, your course isn't going to sell and no one's going to learn from it. On that point as well, you also want to be making sure that your font size is big enough to be read on the internet and to be read by as many people as possible. So you don't want to be going smaller than a font size 12 or 14, I would say, at an absolute minimum. And finally, on that note, you want to be looking at your text colour as well. Your text colour needs to be legible. So something like black, dark navy blue, deep purple, something that's dark and it's going to stand out on the background that it's in. Red is traditionally not a good font to write in, particularly if it's on a white background, because it has been well researched that red font, particularly on a white background, is not very legible for people, particularly with dyslexia. So it might be a font colour that you want to avoid there. Equally, anything that is luminous, anything that is too bright, particularly if it's on a white background, can be very difficult to read. And equally, your pastel colours and your pale colours can be very difficult to read. And I know that at the moment, things like pale pinks, pale greys, lots of pastel colours, they're incredibly fashionable, and I agree, they are beautiful. I've got pastel pink on my own website, but you've got to think about the legibility of those text colours there. I once did a course where all of the buttons were in very, very pale pink, and all of the writing on top of those pale pink buttons was in white. And I can tell you it was nigh on impossible to actually read what was on each button. You were pretty much guessing a lot of the time. So just because it looks pretty, you've got to interpret how it's going to be looked at by your customer and by your students. It's also quite similar with if you are putting text with images in the background. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this, and quite often it can emphasize a point that you're saying or bring a lot of eye-catching imagery. It can make your course really interesting, but what you need to be making sure is that your wording is not being lost with the images in the background. So you might need to use an overlay on the image, for example, so that your text stands out and it's really legible for your student and for your reader. And what I would say is, if you're not too sure about a font colour, if you're not too sure about a font size or the font itself, is get different people to test it out, particularly on different devices, because how an image or how text might appear on your screen with the colours on your screen, it doesn't necessarily mean that those colours will look exactly the same on somebody else's screen or on somebody else's device. So it's always worth testing on multiple devices and even multiple brands. So don't necessarily, if you're creating on a MacBook, don't go to your friend's MacBook and try and check out the same thing. Maybe go and look at somebody else's laptop screen, and because people will have different settings, different brands have different settings in themselves. So it's worth checking it on different screens and different devices, as I said. So there's been a whole load of things that we have gone through in this episode to make your online course look more professional. And just to run over those points again, the first thing you can do is get yourself a professional domain name. The second is get yourself an SSL certificate. Make sure it is activated. Don't go out and buy another one though. As I said, the vast majority of the time when you buy packages for online course platforms, they do include an SSL certificate for your online school. So just have a double check where that is on the settings and make sure that it is activated. Reach out to their support team for whichever online school you're using if you can't find those settings. Third, check your course layout, make sure that it makes sense, and do a walkthrough of your entire course a couple of weeks after you've completed it to make sure that everything in that course makes sense. Check your grammar and spelling. I'll leave a link to Grammarly down in the show notes, and I'd really recommend using it. As I said, there's a free and a paid for version, but personally, I've never used the paid for version. I've only ever needed what is available in the free version. And finally, check your font and text colour as well as your text size. Make sure it is legible for everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Hope you have got a lot of value out of it, and I will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bloggers Creating Courses. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and a review. Ratings and reviews help us to reach more people who want to build and scale their online course, so you're really helping to widen the support for our blogging community. To catch all of the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @VeritySongon. I'll see you next time. Happy content creating.